Sophie's second and final posthumous album is finally out, and I have a lot of thoughts. This video is going to be very different from my usual reviews. Many of you actually discovered this channel because of my video on the evolution of Sophie, one that I did many years ago prior to her passing. I'd actually hesitated making another video, especially after her tragic passing 4 years ago, because it's just hard for me to even record or put down words about how important she was to me, modern pop music, and the wider queer community. So when her brother and family revealed earlier this summer that they were releasing what could or what would have been the follow-up to her legendary debut, I knew that it was time to unpack these feelings. I'm not going to numerically assign this record a score as I normally do. Instead, I'm just going to talk briefly about Sophie, some general thoughts about this record, her impact, and take each track one by one as I normally do. I've also decided to forego fancy visuals and such for this video. So here are my general thoughts. Sophie Zion was a titan in her own right. She is the godmother of the hyperpop genre, a pioneer whose music felt tactile yet abstract. She had broken out with Product, a collection of brilliant, provocative singles that challenged the concept of music and what pop was during the heights of the poptimism movement. For a time, she worked shrouded in mystery and represented herself through avatars or different voices of sorts, the most prominent being Charli XCX, a beloved collaborator and a fellow pop pioneer. Charli and her had actually created Vroom Vroom, an EP that teased a record that unfortunately never came to be due to label interference and people not being ready. Sophie would formally unmask herself full stop in 2017 with It's Okay to Cry, her first ever single to feature her voice and image, and she'd go on to release her debut, Oil of Every Pearl's On Insides, a musical odyssey of a debut album that was nominated for a Grammy. Towards the end of the 2010s, Sophie had been in so much demand working with Lady Gaga, a few rappers, Charli, of course, and others. Unfortunately, on January 30th, 2021, Sophie passed from an incident in Athens, Greece, falling from a rooftop while trying to see the moon that evening. Sophie had been in the process of preparing a follow-up record, with sources close to her saying that it was just about done. Publications, fans, dear friends, and collaborators all shared their grief and condolences, and it became clear that music had lost a hero that day. Charli dedicated Crash to Sophie and recently put So I from her smash album Brat, a complicated ode that really spoke to the grief that she still carries to this day. Caroline Polachek has I Believe, which was inspired by Sophie. Friend and fellow hyperpop icon H.E. Cook sampled Bip for his song Without. Kim Petras actually dedicated her trailblazing win as the first ever trans woman to win a Grammy to Sophie. The song that she won for was very much inspired by Sophie herself. Which brings us to today, and Sophie, a self-titled release finished by her brother Benny Long with some help from her siblings and others who knew her dearly. Sophie is a dense yet surprisingly accessible work that fuses many different worlds that Sophie had built for herself. There is an ambient experimental side, her dance floor ready bangers are there, perfect poppy moments, and some slower tender tracks about living and the abstraction of life. This album serves as a testament to her production chops, but her literal singing and speaking voice is unfortunately absent on this record. Instead, focus is on community and collaboration, a hallmark of her career. We end up with a very challenging and rewarding hour and 7 minutes that personally crushed me emotionally, not necessarily because of its quality, but the fact that this is her last album. This is the last time that we get to say the new Sophie record is out. I see some judging this as if it's a final capstone, but this record was meant to be just one chapter in a long-running story that was tragically cut short. And now a track by track. We open with the full horror and instrumental opening that spoke to the intentional, ethereal emptiness of her production. It almost feels like an actual horror movie score, enveloping you and preparing you for what's to come. Then we go to Raw, a collaboration with Jazzy that spoke to her potential in the rap space. Jazzy raps about his raw life and delivers an earworm of a chorus, but the star, of course, is Sophie's oddball production that elevates his verses and delivery. The occasional use of a dissonant note adds authenticity to his lyric about how messy his life is. It's grimy, dirty, intentional, as per her usual standard. plunging asymptote with Juliana Huxtable was released all the way back in 2018, but its inclusion here does make sense. The surreal spoken word lyrics are taken from a performance of Xavier Shaw's dance piece Buffer. Sophie uses it as a grounding rod as she creates a wild sonic soundscape that captures a literal plunging asymptote against white noise. It is spacey, jarring, the texture creates this unease and dread, an environment where lasers just drum in through and the synths really become more complicated. The Dome's production with Nina Kraviz is ambient heaven. The production bolsters Kraviz's lines about unpredictable reality, algorithms, and the nature of questioning existence. Sophie has always been an existentialist spirit. I couldn't help but get lost in this track. I thought it was very arresting hearing Kraviz and Sophie create an alternate reality, a protective dome where consciousness goes and flows to cradle and create life. Which makes Reason Why a little bit jarring. Many heard this track back in 2018 and listened to bootlegs, but the final product is just as amazing. Featuring Kim Petras and BC Kingdom, this hypnotic dance track is just really everything. Kim is an absolute star on this, as she was on 1-2-3 Days Up. It really spoke to her potential at the time. Her verse is a highlight for me. The chorus looping at the end before evolving into its final form is very much Sophie. It's quintessential her. I'm so glad we have it. Live in My Truth continues the poppy streak this time, featuring BC Kingdom again and Liz. The opening vocals being pitch up really do set up the track well. The lyrics do deal with some common themes about self-acceptance and partying as escapism and truth-telling. I really like the raised vocals along the chorus. They really make the song feel complete. The looped synth really does make this track feel infectious. Again, Sophie's production and intent is what sets her apart. The bass almost feels like a tactile period to each line. The lyrical content is secondary to the song's presentation because Liz's vocals end up being nonsense towards the end, but they do work well. Why Lies is another BC Kingdom Liz collab, but Liz gets more emphasis this time. Her vocalizations during the chorus add another layer to an already complex situation that plays well with the synths. I'll be honest, I'm not so big on BC Kingdom's presence on these tracks, but the production, their voice is pleasing along with it, but it does overpower the way they're mixed in. Thematically, the song is about overcoming deception and seeking truth. Towards the end, the drums really feel like gunshots. The next section, from Do You Want to Be Alive to One More Time, has to be one of my favorite track runs in a while. Do You Want to Be Alive with Big Sister, the lyrics are brash techno-babble delivered with attitude, but the production transforms it into something transcendental, like the chorus itself acknowledges the transformation. The track moves faster and faster and becomes liquid with a drip. Then we get that amazing outro that just speeds everything up and feels like an original track that had been hit with lightning and then transitions into elegance with Popstar. Elegance is one of my highlights. It's dynamic from the start. The bass really rattled my apartment's walls and disturbed my neighbor's dog. There's one line in Elegance that just delivered in different tones, and the voices and the bass line just really dominate and eats up this track. I'd actually seen the movie The Substance earlier this week, and that film's score very much felt like Sophie's work. This track would have perfectly fit into that movie. It's just eerie as it goes faster, and the clacks start to take over the track and sound like a smack over and over again to hammer in the point. But then it finally evolves into this beautiful, synthy, funky energy that's carried by that thorough line of that synth that's just floating in and out, and the closing melody perfectly transitions to the next track. Not all of the tracks transition to each other, but this section does. Berlin Nightmare with Evita Manchi is another highlight. The only lines are, "We come from Germany, honey," in German. The rest is this metallic yet syrupy drum-heavy production that's broken apart by the refrain. This song is a dance track for the ages. I personally cannot wait to hear this playing at nightclubs. Then it goes out into Gallop, which is my personal favorite track. It's just this ripping instrumental that takes its namesake very seriously. I'm really surprised with how amazing she was in taking the synths and the drums and making them move like a horse's gallop. This is a technical production masterpiece, just mathematically calibrated sound of explosion and techno energy. I was worried about the lack of vocals, but the song speaks for itself towards the end. I just wish it was longer. One More Time with Popstar closes out my favorite section. This one was never played in full during her festival runs, but it became a fan favorite. The only lines are "One More Time." This track's very intense, but it builds towards a euphoric collection of sounds towards the end that evoke Halloween to me, or at least that movie score. The chilling piano closing sounds like an entrance to another plane of existence. Exhilarate brings the album down to a more conventional lyrical structure. Bibi Borrelli, she sings about the thrill of living life to the fullest, a theme in all of Sophie's work. Sophie's instrumentation really evokes a feeling of climbing a mountain or going on an adventure. This reminded me of her more philosophical work, like just taking your time to make sure things work really reminded me of her work ethic. Always and Forever with Hannah Diamond was revealed to be about their friendship and sharing dreams that eventually became a song. Diamond's vocals are a magical fit for Sophie's dreamy, squishy production. This track is beautiful and a testament to the Sophie Forever ethos of this record. My Forever is another lyrical track that captures the yearning qualities of Sophie's work. The instrumental fuses with Cecil Believe's vocals to really capture someone's forever. The chorus in the context of Sophie's passing made me very emotional when I first listened to this. This is very well-produced pop, actually pretty accessible stuff. The finale, Love Me Off Earth, is a great closer to the album featuring Doss. This track really lets you relish in the instrumental elements. The vocals do take their time to come in, and again, the lyrics in the context of Sophie's passing makes this a very emotionally charged experience. One can't help but feel like this is a message from Sophie, from the stars, and the way that the track morphs and shifts from jangling keys to pitched vocals, transmorphing middle of the song before closing out with her signature tactile playfulness. This track really did make me miss Sophie the most. This record, Sophie, is not a perfect record. Compared to her debut, it's not as inventive or brilliant, but this record was never meant to be the pinnacle of her journey. It was always going to exist as a page in a book that, sadly, is never going to be finished on its own terms. Instead, we get this loving tribute and recreation of an icon whose time came way too soon. I'm eternally grateful that we have this record and that we're still talking about Sophie to this day. Sophie Forever. That's a review. Sophie Forever. And that's a wrap. I'm sorry if this video is very brisk and not complete, much like the work itself, but I just really wanted to make this video and talk about someone who really did inspire and move an entire genre. There's a lot of discourse about this album, whether or not it really was complete, and etc., and I don't think any of that matters. She's not with us here today, and I think that is the saddest thing about this whole thing. She wasn't able to put her final stamp on these songs, but to be able to hear them in whatever form that we have, I do think that's important. And Sophie was very important, and someone who will continue to really just influence how music goes, even long after we forget her name, though we will never forget her name. I just want to give a quick shout out to my members. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. A shout out to my subscribers, especially the ones who signed up because of the Sophie video. This video is for you. Thank you so much for joining this community. Not to make it about myself, but I really started this channel to cover obscure pop stars before eventually cashing out and becoming mainstream, but Sophie meant so much to me, and I never expected that video to be a hit, and I never expected to have a channel, and I have my channel because of Sophie. Comment below what you felt about this album and how you feel, and, all love around Sophie Forever. I will see you very soon for the next video.